agriculturalists, lawyers, designers, because from diversity comes the greatest breakthroughs. We're Sydney in name only. We're a partnership between 11 New South Wales universities and TAFE across the state, having launched thanks to cornerstone support by the New South Wales Government. Regardless of background, location or discipline, SSE is the destination for practical training, support and mentoring. We encourage our students to collaborate and network inside a diverse community environment.
This vision, membership, diversity and community are what make us SSE. And it's not a novel idea.
This is a tried and tested approach based on the Stockholm School of Entrepreneurship. To date, it's the world's most significant school of its kind, and Stockholm is second only to Silicon Valley for tech startups.
At SSE, we believe the success of all of us depends on dreams, becoming goals, becoming real businesses, growing careers, towns, cities, regions, and societies. We are SSE, and you are most welcome to join us.
All right, welcome everybody. If I could ask you to take your seats, I think we'll get started. So after that brief introduction to the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship, it's my pleasure to welcome everybody here that's attending our session in person here at the SSE's Ultimo campus, but also to those that are streaming in live from across the state. Welcome to everybody. My name's Jonathan Jones. I'm the Education and Training Director here at the Sydney School of Entrepreneurship. And I'd like to start by acknowledging and paying my respects to the traditional owners of this meeting place, which is the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in attendance tonight. Just before we get started with our panel session, there are a couple of elements that I'll just run through in terms of safety. Restrooms are out the front door and either on the ground floor, and the ladies is up on the first floor. Emergency exits are located at the back of the building, and in the unlikely event that we hear an alarm or that we have an issue, please just follow some of our team's directions, and we'll direct you out to the Mary Ann Street exit, but it's the Jones Street Mall that we gather on. So we'll make sure that we keep you safe, and if that does happen, we'll make sure that we take a glass of wine or something out there to keep you company while it's occurring. So tonight's event format is going to be a panel session, and the idea is twofold. One is to talk about the opportunity that is India, and learning about some of the demographics, the growth story, but also the story of individuals that have taken businesses, taken their startups to India. Those that advise businesses who are looking to access the India market, and those who educate between the two countries. So we'll have a panel session. It will be followed by some question and answers, and then I'll give a brief overview of the Young Entrepreneur India Bootcamp, a program that we at the SSE have been working with our colleagues at the New South Wales Government to bring about. And that bootcamp, I'll talk in detail at the end, but in a nutshell, it's the opportunity to undertake an immersive program visiting 4 cities and many companies over in India early next year, with a lead-in of a preparation masterclass to help you ready your business, ready yourself, and to get ready for the opportunity that awaits you. I'd now like to welcome our panel to the stage. So please join me in welcoming Mugunthan Siva, who is a Managing Director and Co-Founder of India Avenue, Ricky Sutton, CEO of Oovvuu, and Anuraj Gambhir, Strategic Business Advisor, Tech Visionary and Innovation Evangelist. Gentlemen, if I could welcome you to the stage. I might take a seat on the end if that's okay. Oh yes, turning the microphone on would be a fantastic idea. And as we go to questions, we have some roving microphones for those of you that are present. If you could wait with your question, just so that the people who are streaming can pick that up. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us here at our campus and giving your time to share your experience and of course your valuable insight. We might just start with a brief overview. If you could tell our audience what it is you do and your involvement with the market today.
Sure. Who would you like? You go first.
Okay.
Anuraj,
Well, sure. Audible? Yeah. Right. So I consult on strategy and innovation to various entities, starting from corporates to startups. I mentor a lot of startups here and work with many incubator accelerators here in Silicon Valley and actually in India. Also teach entrepreneurship and innovation with a few business schools, including across the road at UTS. So a range of different things, but I just really play the role of dot connector and try and cross-pollinate ideas across different industries. Some of the prime industries I've really been working is telecoms is my background, mobile technology, designing mobile devices along quite a bit of my journey, but then moving in health and wellness, transportation, energy, different domains, education and health tech probably being some of the two ones I've inclined more towards. But yeah, so I've really spread across different areas, but tend to spend a lot of time with hardware startups, with IoT, augmented virtual reality, and wearable tech being some of the sweet spots that I tend to work in.
Cool. Hello, I'm Ricky. Oovvuu's a New South Wales generated startup. We're 3.5 years old. We grew out of Fairfax. Our mission is to put a contextually relevant video in every article on the planet. We started out by hiring journalists and doing rights deals and acquiring video content and putting them in articles in News Corporation. We learned very quickly that there were 90,000 articles an hour being published, about 26 million topics a day, and we couldn't scale. So we wrote some tech to read articles, watch videos, and match them together. And unbeknown to us, it became an AI. And it became an AI that was so good that we're now the poster child for Watson, and we are now on stage and opening Watson conferences all over the world. So we have been operational now in India for about 18 months, working with the media companies over there. We started off with 3, we've got 22 now. We just opened in Europe last week, we open in the US next week. We're live already in Africa and India. And just quickly, the reason we chose India as a market to go to as an Australian company was because we thought it would be really hard. And so we figured that we'd try and do the hardest markets first, because then the easy markets would be easy. So we went to India first, then we went to Africa. And we nailed those 2, and now we're expanding into Europe and the US.
Great, thank you.
Hi, yeah, my name's Mugunthan. I've spent most of my working career in Australia in financial services. In 2005, I was given the opportunity to work for a startup business in India in financial services. I lived in Mumbai for a period of 3 years, and we were successfully able to build a mutual fund business in India. Since then, once I came back to Australia, I wanted to maintain and continue the roots and knowledge that I'd built up whilst I was over there. So I got together with the guys that I'd worked with over there, and we started up our own business in Australia in 2015, again, about 3 years now. We've probably moved now onto a status of boutique investment house, and essentially the business called India Avenue is about providing knowledge, information, advice to Australian and New Zealand investors in their journey towards understanding India and why they might consider investing some of their money into Indian businesses. At this stage, largely listed businesses, but over time we would expect our company, India Avenue, to branch out and be the provider of solutions for investors seeking exposure to India.
Great, thank you, and welcome once again. So Mugunthan, we might start with you. So as an expert in advising businesses on entering the India market, how would you position the opportunity for a startup?
Well, I guess from a startup perspective, you are looking at where there's the greatest opportunity and where there is the greatest opportunity for to go from complexity to lower complexity, as Ricky pointed out. Also scale. If those two things can come together and you have a government which is largely proactive, pro-business, pro-reform, then you have ideally a great ecosystem for a startup to thrive. I think one of the huge attractions is if you can get a difficult market right, it gives you a moat around your business, and that moat with scale attached to it can be a very successful way to grow.
Great. Now, I know you had a couple of slides which we have available. Would you like to talk to some of the growth story?
Sure, yeah. I mean, on this slide, which some of you may have seen before, but essentially it's a bit noisy, but in that noise, what you can see there is GDP growth globally, when it's forecast by IMF at the moment for most of the developed countries, is between 2 and 3%, and has been for especially since the GFC occurred in 2007. If I look at the two economies where growth has been quite strong, then they are India and China. And what we're set to see over the next couple of decades is really India take leadership, given that it's got a very young and significant population, 1.3 billion people, with 50% of them being 26 or younger. Means that there are substantial opportunities. There's 1 million people turning 18 every month in India, for example. So, we expect that this will create substantial opportunities for businesses that are going to operate in that ecosystem. And, the demographics of India, which we talked about, are one of the key drivers. It's also coming from a very low GDP per capita. So there's 1.3 billion people. The GDP of India is about 2.5 trillion. So essentially, it's still at a very early stage in terms of individual wealth. There might be 100 million very wealthy people, but there's also a lot of income inequality. And as that equality starts to reduce, you'll see, again, substantial opportunity for businesses. So essentially, one of the other key things that I'd highlight also is that, as you may or may not have seen, there's a document put out by the Australian government that talks about what are the opportunities for Australian businesses going into India, and they've highlighted 10 key states. Now, just to understand these states, the largest state in India has a population of 200 million, which is the population of Brazil, for example. And the top 10 states of India have a population of 900 million people. So one of the key things to understand when you're looking at a domain like India is really to understand that each of these states is like a country. India is, in fact, Europe, with several dialects, several languages, and understanding how to navigate through this is critical for any new business.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add a little bit more to that. I think it's an amazing wide landscape, 29 states, 9 union territories, obviously 1,600 dialects actually, in so many languages. So rightly said, it's more than a European continent in its own right, called the Indian subcontinent. But it's the diversity, it's the heritage, it's the culture, and there's obviously a lot of depth in the history, which is what made India where it is today. And okay, looking at the startup landscape, and obviously the youth population, one of the youngest population, as you said, 54% are being under the age of 25, and 45% actually being under the age of 19. So we're talking about, rightly that space of startup ecosystem being a very young, thriving sort of space. And we've got currently about 21,000 odd startups, as I just picked up from last week in India, of which 5,700 are tech startups. So the growth is just phenomenal. And I left India actually 4.5 years ago in my last stint. So just a bit of background, I moved here 32 years ago from India at the age of 15 and did a 19-year walkabout in multiple places around the world, in the US and Europe for 10 years, then India. Spent quite some time there, India and Southeast Asia and Africa. But the sort of wake-up call personally for me was quite amazing in sort of working on many projects with the Indian government and entities in bridging the digital divide and launching, I can talk more about that a bit later, but like the Akash tablet and a lot of learnings in terms of bringing some innovation aspects of what we call frugal innovation and jugaad, which I can again talk a little bit later about.
Yeah. Great. And it'd be great to hear some personal experience. So Ricky, you touched on your overall business journey and specifically your experience in choosing a hard market in India. Maybe could you describe some of your experience in those early days, and what were some of the key lessons that you learned from that you've been able to take to other markets?
Sure. So it would not be natural, you would expect, for a business based in York Street to decide to launch in India, right? That would be an unusual decision. The reason we chose it was for the reasons that both of these guys have mentioned, which is that we saw a very young market. There's virtually no desktop usage in India. They've bypassed it completely, gone to mobile, right? We believe, Oovvuu believes, that the future of all news telling will be free and it will all be on mobile. It will be free and ad funded on mobile. So we saw that India had a very, very fractured mobile market for a long, long time with lots of different players. Data was very expensive, Wi-Fi was very unreliable, desktop didn't happen. But then about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, a guy fixed it and made mobile phones available for very cheap prices, and data became free. And what we saw was consumption of video on mobile in India rise 100% a quarter for 4 quarters in a row, which, if for any of you want to know what a growth business looks like, it's a dead straight line that goes vertically up, straight up. And so what we thought was that we believe that news should be told for free, and we should use, there's a saying, if you give a man a meal, he'll feed his family. You give him a seed, he'll feed his entire village forever. We felt the same way about news. We wanted to tell news to people, to empower them to be knowledgeable and to make good decisions. We wanted to drive more of that GDP. And so knowing that mobile was exploding, knowing there was a very large youth audience, knowing there were 300 million people that spoke English, knowing that we'd built an AI and scale was no challenge for us, knowing that we had 100 broadcasters providing content, we went to India, we found all the major media companies, so Hindustan Times, NDTV, Times of India, all of them are massive, massive media companies, enormous. We partnered with all of them, and now we deliver video to 17.5 million people a day in India. And so for us, we went there because we saw the market was primed for growth. And it's colossal. I don't know how many, I got back from China yesterday, right? Last night, 10:30, quite tired. So there are certain markets we see where consumption is exploding. And when I say exploding, I mean triple-digit growth. Right? And if it's not triple digit, don't go there, right? So if you're looking for triple digit growth, it's going to be India, it's going to be China, it's going to be Africa, right? We'll go to the US, we'll go to the UK, we'll do all of that. That'll be absolutely fine. But the growth there is going to be sub 10%. In a bigger market, but sub 10%. So we wanted to be on the growth train. That's why we went. And so you asked what my experience is. I've been there 4 times this year. I love the place. I feel the energy. The whole country's vibrating. You can feel the energy. And the experience was tricky at the beginning. We had to get over some cultural hurdles. And that was more us than it was the customer. We just wanted to learn from them what they wanted. And then as we found time, we developed very, very close friendships. And if you're going to ask me, I think later on, hope we got time, what are the 3 key things? I've only got one answer to that, is go, go, and go. Just go there and do it, right? Just go and sit with them and do it. That's all.
Anuraj, you've I sort of look at cultural hurdles and the process of taking your business that you just mentioned. Has that been your experience as well with especially in the tech startups that you've been working with who have travelled to India and taken their business to India? Is that a similar story that you've seen played over and over again?
Yeah, I think it's a movement which is obviously still at its early phase. And this is a great initiative, obviously, which is happening. And it's actually part of a vision which I've been talking with the government a little bit about 5 years ago when I moved back, about a vision of Australia-India Innovation Corridor. And I think different facets and aspects of it, and really trying to get startups to understand those markets much more deeply and get to those insights at the coalface is what is very crucial, I think. Because sitting here and being able to look at slides and pictures is one thing, but immersing yourself into that crowd and being part of and just throwing yourself in the deep end is very crucial. And I think that's what the Bootcamp and taking that startup step is very crucial. And I think I kind of refer back to even a conversation, because during my telecom journey, having worked partly with Apple on the iPhone project, while it was a Skunkworks project, and even a conversation I had on a spiritual level with Steve Jobs was about his first journey to India, which was in 1974 during April. And with his friend Katke, who during that time actually visited some places in North India. And it was really, in fact, a book he really fell in love with, which was actually also distributed during his funeral, Autobiography of a Yogi, which I'll highly recommend if anybody's interested, by Swami Paramahansa Yogananda. And it was really, I think, during that work he did at Atari, and what sort of clarified his own personal vision. And a lot of people relate to that, sort of leading to, hopefully, the making of Apple in 1976, bring that clarity. So, I mean, it's that inspiration which people have sort of sought for. And I've seen that in some startups who really wanted to take that early journey, even on a personal level, to connect with, sort of lose themselves to find themselves. So that's a part of what I do a lot in the wellness and the health in the spiritual space, but connecting that with technology. But I think coming back to sort of the more practical space right now, I think the landscape is just so ripe, where the organization of the continent is getting is exponential. And I've seen that since I've been back here, in terms of Prime Minister Modi, who's had so many initiatives. We've got 100 new smart cities on the verge. There's already 35 of those already pretty much up and running. There's a lot of movements towards Make in India. So Samsung and the president of Korea, South Korea, along with Prime Minister Modi, recently launched the largest mobile phone factory. And they're manufacturing, this is Samsung, 120 million mobile phones in Noida, which is a sector in part of the NCR, the National Capital Region, outside Delhi. So a lot of big movements, and countries like Japan is playing a very key role with India also in its growth of the smart city movement. There's a massive amount of connect with Silicon Valley. So I've been a part of that initiative also earlier. And I see that, we're obviously very well positioned geographically with Asia on our front door, even compared to other locations. So I think it's really for startups to think, and to tinker not just in the thousands or the few million, but think of the billion, thinking big. And that's kind of where I try and help them and say, you've got a great test bed here in Australia, but the real market is out there. The scale up of the big opportunity is out there. Yeah.
Very good. Because you mentioned in our discussion before this session that you're taking a group of potential investors and business people to India next year, and it's part of a process of getting them to understand the market and how things work. And what's been your experience there, and how does that impact somebody's a business's ability to make decisions about the India market when they go there and immerse themselves in it versus doing that from afar, perhaps here from Sydney or here from Australia?
Yeah, generally our experience has been when we talk to people who have engaged with India before, it's a project that they did in the 1990s, or that was the last time they went, and it's all too complex and too hard. They feel the cultural differences are so significant that why even bother when I can go to the US or the UK and find more certain growth. But I think those who are taking the journey, as you mentioned, go, those who are taking the journey over there and understanding, that it's perhaps not too hard, and you actually have, if you just put yourself in a position of India, they have got 100 million people over the next 10 years that will need jobs. The only way you will have job-driven growth in India is for startups to thrive. It's not just going to be a story of the top 100 million wealthiest people driving the growth of the country going forward. It actually needs broader employment and broader startup activity. So they are a country that's going to engage with anyone seeking to build a business over there. So yeah, I mean, that's the experience we've seen. Once you're there, you understand much better what the dynamic is going to be like, and you're more willing to engage.
So I agree completely. It's a contrarian view. So most startups, it's a long story, our history, but we chose not to be in Silicon Valley. We chose to actually try to build a company here in Australia and build it from here and make it global. And everybody told us we were mad. Investors refused to invest in us unless we moved to the US. We thought that was unreasonable, so we told them to stuff it. And we self-funded, and we're funded now, but and then everybody told us to go to America and try and be Netflix, or to go to the UK and try and be YouTube. We didn't want to be any of that. We wanted to be something else. That's what a startup's for. It's no, we don't need to build a faster horse, right? We want to do something cool, something new. And then we told them we were going to India, Africa, and China as our first 3 markets. They thought we were completely mad. But the truth is the world order is changing, right? The economics of the world are changing, right? And you mentioned GDP, right? So you drive down the street in any Indian city, there'll be signs on the wall from banks saying, put your money in a term deposit and get 7%, right? Anybody
Even more, actually. It used to be 10%.
Yeah, anybody seen a sign recently in Australia for a 7% return on your investment in a 3-month term deposit? I mean, come on. If you only need to just immerse yourself in it to realize the pace and the opportunity that it presents. The whole world's moving our direction, right? It's moving here, geographically. This is the place to be, right? And so, look, don't get me wrong. If you turn up on an airplane on your own into India and not know a single person on the entire subcontinent, and all you're going to do is organise a couple of meetings and go and try and persuade them to take your tech, it's a bit nerve-wracking. It's 1.3 billion strangers, and you, right? But do you know what? People respect that, and they listen to you, and they give you the time of day, right? And then if you start to succeed for them, then they're happy, right? And I've got really close friendships with people there now. We've been operational for just over a year. It's don't be put off because the size of the prize is so enormous. Oh, and by the way, you won't get rich tomorrow, by the way. That's why startups work. You don't get rich overnight. But what you can do is start to build the foundations for a proper growing business.
Right. Now, we're going to hand over to any questions in a moment, but I'd like to just get the questions started with one of my own. And that's really around key risks. So, Ricky, I think it'd be great if you could start this off. But what's been the key risk factor for you in choosing India as? I mean, obviously it was the first market that you entered, and that has inherent risk with it. But specifically, were there any key risks that you've had to work hard to mitigate, and how have you done that?
Yeah, very honest answers to this. So the first thing is that, and I mean this with the greatest of respect, the majority of the technologists that we meet in India are convinced they're the best in the world, instantly. And funnily enough, when we go to Africa, they think they're the best in the world, and in America, they think they're the best in the world. And so you have to come up against that a little bit, and you have to bypass it. So that's a risk. Sometimes people will be convinced that they'll do it, they can do it themselves. They'll explicitly tell you that I'm just going to copy your technology and build it themselves, and you go, okay, good luck with that. I'll call me in 3 weeks, and we'll do it for you. So you have to call their bluff on that, right? That's the first thing. Second thing is that it's not always easy to get paid early. You have to build a relationship to get paid. So I saw you nod just then, right? So the first thing is that they say, oh, this has all gone tremendously well. We're really happy, but we're going to need another 3 months before we pay you, right? And then I think a lot of people might leave at that point. I'm not sure. We didn't. We just kept ringing them every 20 minutes and said, have you paid us yet? Have you paid us yet? And then they started paying us, and they paid us ever since. So I think the two risks are those. The first thing is that there's a certain cultural ego around the fact that we can do this ourselves. And then the second thing is once you do prove that your tech's right, there's a little bit of work to get paid. But I think those are just natural in a new market.
Yeah, sure. Mugunthan?
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, having lived there in 2005 to 2008 and seeing the change just over the last 10 years, absolutely, I think India's gone from a more inwardly focusing culture towards the recognition that they do need the rest of the world to be able to help grow to their potential. So I think that's been the change of mindset, really.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I recognise that. They're worldly now. They want to know about what's happening in the rest of the world.
It's maybe specifically relating to the tech innovations that you've been involved with, Anuraj.
Sure. So I think, yeah, I mean, obviously on the risk space, I think the level of professionalism has definitely improved over the years, and we've certainly seen a cleanup happening, obviously with the demonetization and so many big movements that have been key junctures along the milestone. I think what we've seen in the tech space, definitely there's been what we've called, or the reverse brain gain, which was earlier a reverse brain drain earlier. So a lot of people who'd gone to Silicon Valley, a lot of people are coming back, and a lot of the Indian diaspora, NRIs and so forth, there's a deep interconnection happening of coming and really collaborating or collaborating back with those worlds. And I actually see that a lot because I'm spending quite some time right now with Singularity University, and we've got a few startups in the social entrepreneurship space where we're really trying to interpolate and see what can we do a lot more deeper with new test beds of disruptive technologies there. But yeah, so I think it's some of the work I was doing in India earlier on the social space was very much around learnings from the bigger, I would say, failures of Simputer and one laptop per child. And then when we came about devising the Akash tablet, which was a $35 tablet, it was a very big project and a mammoth sort of pricing 10 years ago to come up with a very low-cost tablet for education. But it really took quite some perseverance and quite a few iterations to get that. But the momentum it's built up, and certainly the telecom industry, which again, when I was involved with the early phase of having worked with the GSMA to propose GSM technology in India in the mid-90s, it took quite a few political hurdles in terms of pushing that technology, and the cost of moving that infrastructure was very high. But now we've had hyper competition, we've had more consolidation in the telecom industry, and the lowest call rates ever from the most expensive 15 years back, which was, I'm talking about 28, 30 rupees, when you're talking about that being 50, 60 cents, not that much per minute, down to less than a cent a minute, almost free in that level. But the growth has been so phenomenal that, obviously being a mobile first and a digital, explosion that's happening, we've got over close to 500 million internet users just on mobile, with less than 45 million using landline. So it's like a totally different landscape. It's a leapfrog in many ways. We're even leapfrog China in many ways, although China has been ahead in infrastructure. But I think there's some interesting contrasts of learnings there, which are moving forward in this growth.
Can I just add one thing? Also, if you go to, you guys know the red ocean, blue ocean argument on where you go with your business, right? Red ocean's full of sharks, loads of blood, very competitive. Blue ocean, wide open, completely new, go for it, right? You can go to the States, everybody goes to the States, right? You can just get on a plane and go to the States, it's dead easy. Everybody goes, oh, Silicon Valley, fuck Silicon Valley, right? The whole world's a whole ton more interesting than that. There are loads of other things to do. Australia's got loads and loads of really good startups, so we don't have to go to Silicon Valley, you can do it from here. And the whole world's economy is moving our way. So if you want to go to a market that's growing, where you're not fighting with 10 million other people for 3% year-on-year growth, go to a country that's growing at 9%, where there are less people competing. Why wouldn't you, right? Fish where the fish are, right? So the opportunity is in India, it's in Africa, it's in Indonesia, it's in China, okay? All of those countries are billion people countries, right? And you've got so much opportunity to go to all of those. Sorry about the bad language. But I get fed up with people keep telling me to get on a plane and go to America. I just don't want to do it. I want to build a startup here that succeeds in the world, right? I don't want to go to America, right? If I wanted to go to America, I'd have gone to America. So the truth is that the markets are primed. The people are young, they're hungry, they're aspirational, okay? They don't have all the money in the world right now, but they do have all the hunger in the world, right? And so if you were to draw a map of where the future is going to grow, right? There's only 4 places in the world, and I've just mentioned them, right? So that's where it is. And Australia is perfectly placed to benefit right in the middle, right, of all of that. Look, it's a bit of a flight and blah, blah, blah. It's nearer than America, right? But it's worth doing, right? So just do it.
I think I'll just add to that a bit. From the corporate side, where I've spent a lot of my early part of my career as heading innovation for big companies like Siemens and Ericsson. And in fact, with Ericsson, I was involved with setting up the very first innovation lab outside of the headquarters in Sweden as a polycentric hub. And that was actually in India, in Delhi, in Gurgaon. And it took quite some convincing earlier, but it was taken as a real role model for so many other emerging markets. Because what we set up there was a distributed architecture for looking at an emerging market, proximity with and co-creating with the customer. which was really seen as a breakthrough in terms of model that other emerging markets could follow to get customer intimacy. So from a telecom perspective, we could really then work very closely and look at what really is at a grassroots level relevant for those markets. So we looked at industries like agri, clean tech, and so many other relevant spaces where we could look at thriving. Media tech was another big one. Yeah. Obviously, Bollywood, which makes over 1,000 movies, 1,200 plus movies a year, 10 times bigger than Hollywood. Yeah. Of course, not as big in revenue yet. But there's a lot more quality coming out of the place now. Sure. And obviously, as you mentioned about the other media, the biggest newspapers and the
biggest in the world.
Potential is, it is the Times of India.
Yeah.
So I just feel that whole space is now from the corporate space, what we called about innovation centers shifting from west to east and from internal to collaborative. I talk about this next movement being really the startup space where, and I think the timing couldn't have been better because when the premier was in India earlier, several months ago, obviously it took this movement now, which is just the right timing because the startup hub, we've got over 1,200 tenants there, the largest of its type in the Southern Hemisphere. And we've got so much creative know-how in Australia, which is just, I think, waiting to find the right energy to proliferate into these markets. Yeah.
Very good. Do you know, funny thing is, you go to Silicon Valley, okay, every other person's Australian, right? They are, right? You go to
There's 20,000 Aussies in Silicon Valley.
Exactly, right? Everyone's Australian, right? Yeah. So the best ideas are here. You talk about the brain drain from India, right? There's a brain drain from here, right? The opportunities to succeed from here are enormous, right? We are perfectly placed. And there are some brilliant ideas and some brilliant companies here, right? And that's why I was so happy to come and talk here today, right? Because it's an opportunity to share the news that, hey, it is hard at the beginning, but hey, it gets a lot better when you succeed. I can promise you that. And so, just don't jump on an airplane. You don't need to go to the States, right? Do it here.
Yeah, I think I'd like to just add that it's all about, if your journey is more complex and more difficult, that means your payoff for the risk that you've taken is far more significant. And when you are involved with a startup, then essentially you're not trying to be a market that's already massive and take a 1% or 0.1% share in that market. You're essentially trying to say, here's a new market, we don't know what the blue sky of this market could be, and we want to own the market. So for me, that's where a country like India would ideally fit into. You do the hard work, you solve the complexity, you generate wealth out of that, and it takes time, as mentioned. But that's where really a startup culture will fit with the aspirational qualities that exist in India.
Totally agree with that. So the investors at the very beginning told us to, as I said, copy Netflix or copy YouTube, right? And we said, what's the point, right? As you said, you'll take 0.1% market share, you'll be a $5-7 million company, everybody's going to burn their money, it's not really going to be a win, right? What you want to do is build something completely new. And then people look at you askance and say, well, hang on a minute, how do we value that new thing? And you go, well, you look at us and you decide whether we're telling you the truth. And you look at the markets we're going into and the size of the prize, and you try and work out whether our product's going to work and anybody wants to buy it. And then 10 contracts in, and when money's flowing through, suddenly everybody cottons on and goes, yes, of course. Right? So everything didn't exist to start with. Everything had to be created. You should read Peter Thiel's book, 0 to 1. You have to create something from scratch, from an idea, from absolutely nothing, genesis to something, right? That's where the true value exists, right? And that's what startups are for. If you want to grow something 3%, go and work for a big corporate, right? If you want to create something from scratch and make it grow 173x, which is what we did last year, 173x, not percent, x, right? 173x, then you have to create something that simply doesn't exist yet. And that's when you go to a new market.
Any questions from the audience? We have a microphone here. Any questions for our panel members?
Come on.
Maybe while they're thinking, I'll just mention that in the audience is a gentleman, Tarun Gupta his name is. He's actually a traveling entrepreneur from India. And he visits many countries around the world. And he works with many startups. And he's from a very elite institute called IIT Bombay, which is in Mumbai. And they've got some really innovative startups, and he's got a couple of showcases which he's happy to show during the break later on. So we encourage you to have a chat with a real entrepreneur from India who's here, luckily with us. Yeah.
Welcome.
Hi there, my name's Lakshmi, and I have my own startup here in Australia. It's 4 months old. It's called Blue Temple. It's a team engagement activity marketplace and facilitates culture. My question is to Ricky. When was the defining moment when things fell in place and you felt, aha, this is how it works with these guys? When was it?
In India or in
yes,
general?
in India.
In India?
Yeah.
All right, very honest. We launched our product with the Indian Express, okay, who are the #3 news media brand there. And they had a series of very defined customizations that they wanted for our product. So basically what our product does is it reads articles, watches videos, and matches them together instantly. So if you see any video in any of those brands I've mentioned to you just now, including Hotstar, it's us. Okay, so we do the tech in the background of that. And so we did a load of customizations because they told us as a customer they knew best and they told us what they wanted. Those customizations, every single one of them has now been rewound and has gone back to what we actually gave them originally, all right? And we had to do that very carefully and let them think it was their idea, to be honest. And as a result now, they love us. So the answer to your question is that if you sell something to a customer, you've failed. If you've given a solution to a customer that they adore, you've succeeded. So when did we succeed? When they started sending us cupcakes and saying thank you. That's the answer.
Thank you.
But we had to get it very wrong first.
Any other questions? Okay. I might just flip to some information then on the offer at hand. So we, for those of you with a startup based in New South Wales, this is a pretty incredible opportunity to undertake a boot camp in country, visiting 4 cities and meeting with various companies and representatives in India in late January and February. In terms of the access, so we're partnering with the New South Wales Government, and Zone Startups will run the experience on the ground in India. And what you'll be involved with is a series of immersive experiences, the opportunity to gain better insights into company organisational culture, general culture, the opportunity to meet with companies across the entrepreneurial and business ecosystem in India, and to have access to a significant number of contacts that you can then use to build your business up. That's a rough timeline of what will happen on the ground over the 10 days in India. Before that, what we'll do is we'll be working with Anuraj, and the SSE will undertake a program, an education program, essentially a preparation program with all of the startups that are selected to go on the boot camp. And what we'll run through there is essentially some of the cultural and business nuance that you will need to represent your startup over in India, and some of the other aspects of preparation and knowledge around the market that will be valuable. It's an opportunity to form a cohort, so there's up to 40 spaces on the boot camp, so it's an opportunity to get to know other founders and other startups, and to really form alliances and to help each other out through the experience. So it really is quite an amazing opportunity that's on offer here. Now, in terms of what's included, so all of the international flights and twin share accommodation is covered. We also have the masterclass breakfasts and the program with Zone Startups. You will be responsible for some meals and from the list here, travel insurance and what have you, and any visa costs. But largely, this is an experience where the cost is covered, and it really gives a clear opportunity for you as maybe a startup founder or a member of a startup to really focus on capitalising on the opportunity, focusing on your business rather than on how you might fund undertaking a program like this. We do have some eligibility criteria that are listed above. Essentially, you need to have a startup, an early stage startup. You need to have a proof of concept. And on our website and on the application form, you'll see significant detail on what that will involve. We've tried to keep the application process as simple as possible. And you have until roughly the end of the month to make your application through. You need to hold IP or the rights to commercialise. Current passport and visa are a must. It's not something to leave until the week before, and that's something that you'll have to look after yourselves. But really, we are hoping that this is an opportunity for you and your business to access the market, immerse yourself in that market, but also gain the right kind of contacts and the right kind of traction to really grow your startup and get that on its way. There's some more information available on our website. We have a number of members of the SSE team here that can answer your questions on the bootcamp opportunity. We also have some representatives from New South Wales Government that we've been working with. So Alex Robertson and Matthew Jessup in the audience here, who I'm sure would be happy to answer any questions that you might have as well.
Thank you for the Sydney Startup Hub. Brilliant. Thank you.
Any time was the answer to that. So thank you all for joining us. For those that are streaming live, thank you for joining us. The Sydney School of Entrepreneurship, as many of you know, is an organisation of 12 members. So we are Sydney in location, but statewide in operation. It's great to have those of you that are in non-Sydney locations being able to access us online and to hear this information. As I said, further information available via our website. And we hope to receive a large volume of applications for what is a fantastic opportunity. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for attending tonight and sharing your insights and experiences. That's been really valuable. I think we've got some wine and nibblies to go yet. So if you are able to stay and you've got any other questions, please feel free to stick around and we'll get those answered for you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a very small gift. Thank you. There we go. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
That's what